Hi y'all and welcome back to the channel. In some ways it feels like this series on Lord Dunmore's War is kind of at a point that it's winding down, but at the same time there's some important stuff that I still want us to cover because a lot of the accounts I've read of Dunmore's War, it's like they get to the Battle of Point Pleasant and Camp Charlotte and then they just stop as if that's the end of the story, and really it's not. So I want to make sure we get all the way to the end there. Now, as I mentioned before, Colonel Andrew Lewis and his Southern Division, they did not cross the Ohio River until a week after the Battle of Point Pleasant, which was October 10th, 1774. But what was everyone else doing during this time? Cornstalk, the Shawnee leader who had led the men against Lewis, he called a council. He knew the Battle of Point Pleasant wasn't going to be the end of things. They had certainly done damage to the Southern Division, but there was a lot of that army left, and Dunmore had hundreds more men at Fort Gower, so one way or the other, he knew that the Virginians were coming. Frankly, I'm not sure there could have been any outcome of the Battle of Point Pleasant that would have changed this, which is probably why Cornstalk offered to try to make peace ahead of that battle. But regardless, you know, he knew that they didn't do enough damage to stop the Virginians from chasing them. And if anything, the damage that they did do just increased the Virginians' desire for revenge, which is normal, right? I'm sure the Shawnee had their own desire for revenge going on. But either way, there wasn't going to be a good outcome, and Cornstalk knew this. So he kind of presented the two extreme options to the council to kind of really demonstrate how dire the circumstances were. So he told them at this council that the Virginians were coming. And they, the Shawnee, would all be killed, is what he says. And he presents them, like I said, with two options. The first is that they should kill all of their women and children, and then all of the Shawnee men should fight the Virginians to the last man. So this is kind of presenting the extinction of the Shawnee as the first option. The second option is that they should immediately sue for peace, accepting whatever terms the Virginians are willing to offer. And this is quite the set of choices, right? I mean, neither one of these would have been appealing. But where his warriors had rejected the idea of peace the night before Point Pleasant, now everyone's on board. They agree with him. You know, it's going to be peace at whatever terms the Virginians offer. Now, what's Dunmore doing? You know, he's kind of the other character here that we've lost track of slightly. So Dunmore had been up the Ohio River at Fort Gower, which was on the Ohio side of the river about 30 miles away from Point Pleasant as the crow flies. And remember, Point Pleasant, that battle was on October 10th. The next day, on October 11th, Dunmore left Fort Gower with about 1,200 men and marches westward into what's now the state of Ohio towards the lower Shawnee towns. Keep in mind, I don't have the sort of records to verify this troop count like I've been checking up on the Southern Division's troop count, but anyway, he was accompanied by two men that you may recall hearing about. The first is Captain Whiteeyes of the Lenape, and he's been working all summer to maintain peace. The other man was Captain John Gibson, who was an Indian trader. He had been married to Logan's sister, and she died in the Yellow Creek Massacre. Their child had been there with her at the massacre, and rather than killing this child, the Virginians had, kept it and then passed the child along to the father, John Gibson. So now he has a lot on his plate. And he is here with Dunmore leading some West Augusta men, which, remember, that's not a county in itself, that's just what they're referring to Fort Pitt as, or in that area around Fort Pitt. And he's also serving as an interpreter because as an Indian trader, he's familiar with the language, he's familiar with the people. But I kind of have to wonder a little bit what Gibson was thinking, given everything that had occurred so far in 1774 for him. But anyway, so Dunmore's army, they stop right around the area that's now called Pickaway Plains, which is just south of the modern-day Columbus, Ohio. They named the spot Camp Charlotte, and there's some differing opinions. We don't know for sure if this is named after Queen Charlotte or Dunmore's wife, Charlotte. Maybe it was both. Regardless, now Dunmore claims that he has no idea about the Battle of Point Pleasant. You know, in his later reports, he's like, I had no idea this was going on. I just decided to march. But this seems questionable because he and Lewis had been sending messengers back and forth for days, right? Like we already talked about McCulloch stopping and talking to Captain Stewart. And so why would you make a decision to march without sending a message to the other part of your army so that they would know what the plan is? It doesn't quite make sense to me. One of the other reasons that we kind of doubt this is from the memoirs of Captain Stewart of the Southern Division. And granted, he has bias here, but there's a couple things he says which seem notable. And the one that I really want to mention here is that he later heard a report that on the day of the Battle of Point Pleasant, Dunmore was seen walking along Fort Gower with Captain Connolly and some other officers when Dunmore, quote, observed to the gentleman that he expected by that time Colonel Lewis had hot work, end quote. Hot work obviously meaning the battle. And granted, this isn't evidence, but if this was actually overheard, then that's a pretty good suggestion that he knew good and well what was going on. And then there's also, if you remember from the last video, Captain White Eyes had warned Dunmore that at least 700 American Indians were going south to talk with Lewis. So even if he didn't know what day the battle would take place, there's a pretty good chance he knew what was going on. And we're about to see that there's at least one other area that he kind of fudges his official report. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that he did that with this as well. Who knows? Anyway, so in Dunmore's official report to Lord Dartmouth, he claims that his men, quote, killed 6 or 8 and took 16 prisoners, end quote, along the march to the Pickaway Plains. He writes as if they were ambushed on the march, but I'm pretty sure he is conflating events. This is that situation where I'm like, I think he's already fudging the report. So then finally, on the 17th, so the Battle of Point Pleasant's on the 10th, Dunmore sends a letter to Lewis ordering him to cross the Ohio on the 13th. So 2 days after Dunmore leaves Fort Gower, he sends that message. And then on the 17th, that is when Lewis finally gets around to it. We're told that Lewis takes with him about 1,150 men, so he probably didn't leave very many behind at Point Pleasant. If that number is accurate anyway, I mean, it means that a lot of the wounded who were still capable of fighting would have joined him. But then as they get closer to Camp Charlotte, Dunmore sends a message telling Lewis that he's close to negotiating a peace, and he invites Lewis and Lewis's choice of officers to come to Camp Charlotte. And the way that the record says this, we don't know for sure if Dunmore says what Lewis is supposed to be doing with the rest of his army. Maybe it's implied, but it's kind of vague here. And there certainly seems to be differences of opinion on how it should be interpreted. But regardless of those differences, Lewis interprets the message as he's going to continue forward with his entire army. And this makes the Shawnee nervous, understandably so, because they're willing to negotiate and accept terms, but it starts to look like Dunmore can't control the Virginians. So Dunmore sends another message, specifically ordering Lewis to stop this time. And Lewis claims that they were in a bad place to make camp when he received the message, so he marches a little bit further along until they reach water and a decent place to stop. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe the men didn't want to stop. We don't know. Lewis did claim that he didn't mean to end up so close to the Shawnee towns as he did. And I think it's only fair to point out that where Dunmore had Indian traders to serve as guides, it doesn't appear that Lewis had any such guides that were familiar with what we now call the state of Ohio. So, I mean, I'm not aware of a single man in his army having crossed the Ohio River before. And at that point, I don't think there's really much for maps. There's not much for a guide. It kind of makes sense to me that Lewis could end up somewhere he didn't quite intend. And I'm not trying to say that for sure. I'm not trying to justify him disobeying orders. I'm just trying to provide that context because I I do think that that is a logical excuse. But at the same time, I'm not dismissing the idea that they wanted revenge. I'm sure that's the case too. The Virginia frontier had a lot of Scots, Irish, and other colonists who just, in general, had a reputation for being stubborn and hot-headed. So, it's believable. But to try to prevent any other problems, Dunmore visits Lewis's camp, and he has with him Whitefish, not to be confused with White Eyes. He has with him Captain Gibson, and about 50 men. We don't know for sure who all these 50 men were. Lewis supposedly had to post extra guards outside his tent to protect the governor from the Southern Division's temper. And note that these reports, they don't say that it's protecting, say, Whitefish. No, it's specifically the governor. So it sounds like these men are already kind of frustrated by his supposed leadership during this campaign. But Dunmore helps matters even further by saying that the Southern Division, the army that he ordered to cross the Ohio River and join him, he says that they're now hampering his peace negotiations. They're not helping. And he orders all of them back to Point Pleasant. All, including Lewis and the officers. At this point, no one is allowed to stay and be a part of the peace negotiations. So, first, I'm sure that just went over completely, just brilliantly, and caused no hard feelings whatsoever, right? I'm sure you can imagine the same thing. Second of all, if you read reports that at Camp Charlotte, the Virginians forced the Shawnee to give up additional land, well, we'll get to the terms of the peace in a minute, but remember what Virginians actually means here. We're not talking about the men from the frontier who marched under Lewis. We're talking about Dunmore, the royal governor, who's speaking on behalf of Great Britain just as much, if not more, than he's speaking on behalf of Virginia. So, I think that's important. And remember also that the Shawnee were not the only American Indians who were present at Camp Charlotte that were negotiating peace. Once Dunmore gets back to Camp Charlotte, Governor Dunmore soon learned that not all of them were willing to accept terms as easily as the Shawnee. The Shawnee, who he had been repeatedly accusing of being warmongers all summer, talking about them taking up the hatchet, this and that, whatever, now they're the ones willing to agree to terms, and the Ohio Haudenosaunee are not. Honestly, the terms did not penalize the American Indians anywhere nearly as bad as they probably could have. In a lot of ways, it is extending the terms that were seen at the end of Pontiac's War. Some accounts claim that Dunmore demanded they cede additional land, like I kind of referenced a minute ago. But in actuality, that demand was just that they recognized the cessions of earlier treaties. Granted, these were cessions that the Shawnee said, hey, we didn't agree to. But whether or not that's the case, it's not something new. This is land that had already been discussed previously. He also required the return of any people, white or black, and all stolen horses that had been taken by the Shawnee or the Ohio Haudenosaunee since Pontiac's War. To guarantee that they would abide by these terms, the Shawnee were required to give 4 of their chief men to hold as hostages until everything had been fully settled. So this also wasn't a particularly unusual requirement. And that's pretty much it. That's the terms. And like I said, the Shawnee, they're willing. They were expecting worse, quite frankly. But the Ohio Haudenosaunee don't agree. They were the ones who had given away this land to begin with, and they had recommended that forts be built. But now all of a sudden they're not cooperating. And that's despite the fact that Captain John Logan, who had been, he had just returned from his raiding that he'd been doing all summer, he had agreed to the terms of peace, and he had promised to return the prisoners that he had taken in 1774. He didn't want to join the peace talks because he was still upset about the loss of his family, but he did send a message through his brother-in-law, Captain Gibson. And so you would think that would be promising, right? Because this is the main person of the Ohio Haudenosaunee who has a reason to be upset and he's saying, okay, yes, for the sake of the tribe, let's agree to a peace. But the rest of the tribe, the rest of the Ohio Haudenosaunee, they decide that they're going to sneak away in the night with all of their captives and their plunder, and they're going to go live closer to Lake Erie, and they're thinking that, well, the Virginians just won't be able to reach us there. So we're not going to agree to any terms, we're not going to return anything, we're just going to take off. Dunmore was tipped off to this, though, and he sends Captain William Crawford and about 240 men to stop them. Crawford claims that he's going to Fort Gower for a supply run, and instead he heads north to chase the Ohio Haudenosaunee. They end up catching, I don't know if catching is quite the right word, they encounter one another as Crawford encounters Salt Lick Town, or Seekonk, although I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And that is essentially the modern-day Columbus, Ohio. Many of the Ohio Haudenosaunee still get away, but Crawford's men take about 14 prisoners, and they kill 6, as well as recovering some colonists who'd been taken prisoner, and they destroy the town. And they also take plunder. I think one source said it was about 400 pounds worth of plunder, another said a little bit less, so anyway, they get what they're there for. And I strongly suspect that these are the prisoners that Dunmore's talking about in his report to Lord Dartmouth, even though it's not from the sort of action that he implies in his report, because remember, he implied that his entire army had been ambushed, and that's not the case. Now, at this point, the Ohio Haudenosaunee are cornered into accepting his terms as well. And so that's kind of the point where everyone says, all right, we're going to agree. This is the Camp Charlotte Agreement. 11 or 12 of the Ohio Haudenosaunee that Captain Crawford had captured were kept by Dunmore, and they're sent to Fort Pitt to be held until a formal peace treaty is arranged. We don't know their identities. We just know that he returned a few of those that had been taken and sent the rest to Fort Pitt. The Shawnee hostages we know a little bit more about. They weren't sent to Fort Pitt, they were sent to Williamsburg. And I'm going to try to pronounce their names, and you're welcome to go ahead and laugh at me. I'm sure this isn't going to be quite right, but I'm going to try. So they were called Katamwa, also called the Wolf, though the Virginia Gazette reported his name as Imkatawawa? I don't know. Or the Black Wolf is how they give the English version of his name. Second was Chickasaw, called the Judge. Then Calloway, maybe, called Captain Morgan, and likely a son of Cornstalk. And finally we have Niwa, which is the Snake's son. This was the outcome of the Camp Charlotte Agreement. But it's really important to understand that this is not a treaty, and this is not a finalized agreement. All sides agreed to meet in the spring at Fort Pitt, and that's where they were going to conduct that formal treaty, to kind of ratify the terms and make sure that both tribes had kept up their side of the bargain with returning prisoners and the like. Meanwhile, the colonists are returning home to find out the outcome of the First Continental Congress, because that's been going on at the same time as their campaign to the Ohio River. In the next video, I'm going to cover the Fort Gower resolves, which is something else that's not really discussed, but I think it's important. And depending on timing, I may get to that Fort Pitt Treaty in that video as well. We'll see. As always, I'd love to hear your comments below. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions or, anything else, correct my pronunciation, that's fine too. And please support the channel by liking the video and subscribing if you haven't already. So thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video.